course director, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome back to the British School and to introduce tonight's speaker, Professor Paolo Vitti. Paolo is Associate Professor of Practice at the University of Notre Dame in Indiana, although he's primarily based, or at least splits his time between there and here at the university's Rome Research and Study Center. Not only a historian, Paolo is a practicing architect, and accordingly his work is characterized by historical research combined with professional architectural expertise. He is involved with projects concerning the restoration of cultural heritage and is particularly interested in the use of traditional building techniques and their relationship with sustainable architecture. These research interests and professional expertise have taken him to work at sites across Greece, Turkey, Tunisia, Cyprus, Palestine, and Morocco. And his restoration of the Armenian church and monastery in Nicosia on Cyprus received the European Heritage Award, Europa Nostra Award, in 2015. Elsewhere in Italy, Paolo carried out a survey of the walls of the city of Paestum, and here in Rome, he has worked on the Colosseum, the Domus Tiberiana, and of obvious relevance to tonight's talk, the Mausoleum of the Emperor Hadrian. On this, Paolo has published widely, having for over a decade carried out a close architectural and structural study of the monument, providing important new insights into its design and the way that it possibly functioned. Paolo's analysis proved crucial to our own attempts to understand the structure when the City of Rome course group visited it last week, and it is notable that Paolo's new reconstructions and plans now feature in the interpretive panels of the newly installed museum within. Having published over 50 chapters, articles, and books, Paolo doesn't make it easy to keep an introduction to his research output brief. And so for now, I will limit to noting that his 2016 book, Building Roman Greece, Innovation in Vaulted Construction in the Peloponnese, received not only the Lerma de Brett Schneider Award in Archaeology for research, but also the Grand Prix of the European Union Cultural Heritage Award. While many of Paolo's recent publications have focused on technical and structural matters, tonight I get the impression we are in for something slightly different. And so with interpreting the Mausoleum of Hadrian in the High Renaissance, will you please welcome Professor Paolo Vitti?
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. It's just 11 years ago when I gave my lecture on the Mausoleum of Hadrian, when at that time we had just presented our investigations with Filippo Corelli and Eugenio Losardo. It was a great moment for us to show the results of our work on Castel Sant'Angelo, a building that is notoriously very complicated. As you have seen last week, being there, it's, the Roman part is not so evident. Now it's 15 years that I have been working on that. It's time to close this. It's too much. And after more or less 5 years of stopping my research between 2015 and 2020, a renewed interest and support by the Musei Statali allowed me to continue my research. And also I received a generous grant from the University of Notre Dame, which allows me to do and complete my work on Castel Sant'Angelo. At the same time, I had the privilege this spring semester, this winter, it's called spring, but it's incredibly cold. I was in Cincinnati at the University of Cincinnati at the Department of Classics. I was given the prestigious Titus Fellowship, which allowed me to spend 3 months in the amazing Blingen Library, where I could really dig into that part that is complementary to my studies on site. I am an architect. I base my understanding by drawing on site, and my research is focused on how much you can learn by being and observing and looking at a building with the tools of the architect, which is drawing. And when I say drawing, is not only digital, but is mainly the old-fashioned hand drawing. So if you come again in these days in Castel Sant'Angelo, you will find me there. I think that the visitors should pay an extra amount because they can see on site an old person who is drawing there, and they all take pictures of me, and they are very excited about that. I don't mind. I know that since 1991, when I started to work at the Forum of Paestum, I was used to be there, and everyone looks at you excited. But today, after 1991, we had no digital tools. Today is digital tools. Everyone's taking pictures with the cameras. And when you see someone who is there drawing under the sun, it's, well, this is impressive. It's a dinosaurus. Today's presentation, as you said, adds something to what I have been presenting in these years, and wants to speak a little bit about the evidence we get from High Renaissance architects, artists, and the sources. And this adds new elements for the understanding of the mausoleum. I will start with something that is not the mausoleum, which is Roccabruna, Hadrian's villa, because there is this incredible drawing. We will go back to that, is Cyriacus of Ancona, who is attributed to Cyriacus, which shows this reconstruction of the Mausoleum of Hadrian. And there is this small inscription there. It says Rome apud Tibur, and this has suggested that maybe Roccabruna is inspired or has some similarities with the Mausoleum of Hadrian. The mausoleum, this is our reconstruction, the 3D model inserted into the Lanciani plan of Rome. And you can see, well, there is Hadrian's mausoleum and there is a bridge. So the bridge is a very important component of the project of Hadrian. And so I will start now with making an historic timeline for you to get a better understanding of what happens and what we know throughout the time. I will start with one of the topics I was very, very interested to is that if you look at the corpus of Latin inscriptions, you are given that there are 13 inscriptions, epitaphs that come from the mausoleum that are recorded. It's a monumental work that has been done to record who are the sources who talk about this. But it's always good, as in the same way I go on site and draw looking at the buildings, it's also good to look at the sources. So one of the things I am working on is to look actually at the originals. They all come from this 8th century anonymous manuscript. It's called the Einsiedeln Codex from the Abbey of Einsiedeln. Part of it is also preserved in St. Gallen. And it's interesting because you see this is the inscription that is in the Codex of Einsiedeln, which talks about the inscription that was on the bridge. And this is extremely important. From this, we know that the bridge was inaugurated in 134 CE. That means earlier from the mausoleum. And this is quite important because I think that the bridge was fundamental for the construction process, because materials, the mausoleum is on the right riverbank, and there was materials. I think the evidence is that they were coming from the left bank. So the bridge could be important for all these building materials that were needed for this immense structure. But if you see now, you see that in red, in the itinerary, there is the inscription that is in black ink, but in red, there are additional informations that are not the transcription of the epitaph. So you say in Ponte Sancti Petri, so you see that in the bridge of St. Peter, that is the Aelian bridge. And lower, you see in Adrianio, that is to say in the sepulchre of Hadrian, and relates to the other inscriptions that follow in the page, which are the epitaphs. Hulsen made this proposal, you see that on the right side, of placing the 12 inscriptions that are located in Parte Australi, so in the south part of the mausoleum. He places them according to the description of the anonymous who goes there. He looks at it and he says, on the right side, there are these inscriptions, the left side, there are these inscriptions. So this is incredibly important. And Hulsen makes this, this scheme that is extremely useful just to visualize. You will see that just above the door, Eingang, you have one inscription that is the A, which refers to the most important inscription, is the inscription of Hadrian and Sabina. And it's interesting that in the manuscripts we have in Einsiedeln, there is not this inscription. So we will find when it was recorded later. Another element that is important for the history is the fact that you know the Aurelian walls built in 273 incorporated most likely the mausoleum, because it was an immense structure just out of the city. So it could not make sense to leave it out of the fortification. And again, from the Einsiedeln itinerary, you see on the bottom, it writes, there is a description of the fortification. And he says that in the Hadrianeum, in the sepulchre of Hadrian, there are 6 towers. And this comes with the idea that was by Lanciani of placing the 6 towers in this way, in between the bridge and the mausoleum. Hypothetical. Gothic wars is extremely important because it's the only evidence we have about the decoration of the mausoleum. So Procopius describes in a very long page, very interesting, the attack of the Goths against the Romans in the Byzantines in the castle. And he says that they are desperate, the Byzantines, they break in pieces the statues and they try to throw that, and they are very successful with this. Actually, evidence has shown that there are pieces of horses and male statues that support the idea of this quite important and decoration in the mausoleum. The name Castel Sant'Angelo comes from 1591, when Gregory the Great dedicated a chapel to Saint Michael on the very top of it. So this is the moment when you see in the medieval sources, this becomes Castel Sant'Angelo, or sometimes the sepulchre of Hadrian. Although should be said that in the Latin sources never referred to, sometimes sepulchre of Hadrian, never mausoleum, as the Mausoleum of Augustus, and frequently they refer to the Antonine sepulchre. So it's more related to the later to the Antonine dynasty. In the Middle Ages, it was used by the Roman families. It's, of course, a stronghold. Rome was filled with strongholds, so this comes part of this. The very interesting thing is in 1379, the castle is greatly destroyed. And this is important. What means to be destroyed? It's, I think we have evidence to understand what happened. But it was soon after that Boniface IX starts the reconstruction, and they change the castle to a stronghold for the Pope. This is a crucial moment in the timeline of the castle. And finally, the strategic and military functions increases throughout the time, and between Alexander VI Borgia at the end of the 15th century and Paul III Farnese, it becomes a magnificent residence that you visited, and you know very well how impressive it is. Finally, to be considered that the original bridge is different from the one we see, apart from the three central arches, which are the original, the end, today there are 5 arches. The 2 end arches have been, are new, made after demolishing the 2 Roman ends of the bridge, because when they built the river embankments, they needed to adapt to the levels of the embankments. That said, a very quick view about what we understand, what is our understanding today about the mausoleum. You enter from a vestibule, it's not preserved, but you have the entrance corridor, you have a lower vestibule at the end of the entrance corridor, then you have the helical ramp that brings you up to the level of the burial chamber. At the very end of the helical ramp, you have an upper vestibule, the funeral chamber, and then a round construction on the very top. All this is preserved today, is visible. Is visible if you look for it. But we have the round building, the Roman brick wall is preserved to a height of 50 meters from the floor level of the ground. So this shows that differently from the Mausoleum of Augustus, which is not preserved to its height, here we have the unique, absolutely unique evidence of a most important building in Rome preserved to, and it's like the treasures markets, to its entire height, or the Pantheon. We are into this kind of category, the bust of Diocletian, of course, and others, but this is truly exceptional. This is just roughly the red parts are those that are preserved. The yellow one are hypothetical. So you have the entrance corridor, you have the helical ramp, the funeral chamber, and the helical staircase, which allow to get access to the very top of the rotunda. This stair, I think, was demolished in 1379 when the sources says that the castle was destroyed. And actually what they did, they destroyed the element that could connect to the upper level of the castle, so making it impossible to be used. So there was a lost, we have a lost staircase, but we have evidence or elements that can contribute to our understanding. The upper vestibule, this one, this is my reconstruction, is partially hypothetical here, but here is preserved. You see here that they have evidence of a barrel vault that is inclined, tunnel vault that is inclined, and here we have the evidence of the steps. There is one brick step that allows the understanding that there was a staircase going up. Where I am trying to reconsider this part here, but I'm working on that. This will come out with the publication, I suppose, very soon. So this shows the palimpsest between Roman and medieval. So the purple is what exists today of the mausoleum. The rose is what has been demolished, transformed, and the gray is the castle. So you see how much of the original structure is preserved inside Castel Sant'Angelo. Outside, just to talk about the external elevation, which will be fundamental for understanding the Renaissance sources, you see you have different layers, and these layers, you see clearly the imprints of the blocks, but then there is an area, which is the one that is there. There are no imprints, and this, as we will see, is a very fundamental element because shows that something was happening there. And then you have the upper part. The red line shows the height of the Roman structure, but all the brick wall that you see is the brick facing made by Alexander VI, so we cannot see anymore how the imprints of the blocks that were also in this area. So this is how we understand. You see on the left, there is this flashing dotted line that shows the level, the facing of the drum of the mausoleum in the lower part. And the flashing, the other flashing line is the facing of the upper part of the drum. So there is, between the two facings, there is a 4.5 meters recess. This is what makes it possible to argue that the area that we highlighted on the very top of the imprints corresponds to the presence of a barrel vault. And since there is a barrel vault, we have to consider that there was a colonnade around the drum in the upper part. So this is what we see, and this is the suggested reconstruction of the external part of the mausoleum. Now, let's go into the Renaissance. So now that we have more or less an idea of the history of the building and our studies of reconstruction, let's go into that. First of all, there is this interesting source that says that this Battle of Marino is a battle that is fundamental because after the return of the popes from Avignon to Rome, there is a period of struggle between two parties, the French and the Italian party. This evolves into what is called the Western Schism, which is this struggle between the two parties. So we have popes and anti-popes. And the French get the castle, and they do the first bombardment of the city of Rome from the castle around 3076, 77. And after that, there is this Battle of Marino, where the Italian party, thanks to the strong support of the Romans, they win the French party. And the Romans say, the castle is ours, is not of the popes. And you see the Council of Rome, the Civic Council, they voted for demolishing the castle. So we know from the sources that they started to demolish the castle. We don't know exactly what. So this is why I do consider that what they demolished, because the castle is there, but most likely they demolished the staircase because it was the element that could make unusable the castle as a fortress and for the bombardment. We have evidence also for that. We will get there. So let's start with the first pope who significantly starts to invest on the castle, of course, is a matter of safety for the pope. And Boniface IX succeeds soon after to impose to the civic power of Rome that the castello should be of the pope. And so he makes, we have from Vasari Levite, we know about the fact that through the work of Niccolò di Pietro Lamberti. He is a sculptor, but also an architect. He makes I think in 1400, he makes these works. And from the descriptions and from the analysis of the building, we identify three elements of interest to the Pope. The first one is the demolition of the radial walls that were on the lower part. This to create a donjon, an element that a fortress that would stay separated from the around wall in order to make it a better defensible stronghold. The second element, there is this staircase there, is built to connect. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yes, we can see that here. To connect this level, the level of the burial chamber, where you can get, you remember, you can get through the spiral helical staircase to that level. This staircase had been demolished, the original one, as we said. So it makes sense that there is this staircase that is built by Boniface IX, is identified as having been built by Boniface IX. So makes the point that something happened in the second half of the 14th century. And I think what happened is that they demolished the staircase, the original staircase. So, and this is the evidence. He also works on the tower, and but this is not so fundamental. The other element that happens in that period is that we have with Eugene IV is the first pope after the conclusion of the Western Schism. So it's the moment when the popes finally has the power and can settle in Rome and start to address fundamental issues of a city that had been abandoned by the popes, being in Avignon, having no maintenance, having had a lot of issues. So the popes at that time are very much focused on making this city infrastructure and usable in many things. So at that time, the only under Eugene IV, the very valuable work that is done is the bronze doors that are made by Filarete. And it's interesting because in this lower panel, it's shown the depiction of the crucifixion of St. Peter. And there is the drawing of Castel Sant'Angelo there that actually is shown as the Mausoleum of Hadrian. So this person has a vision, Filarete, you don't know, to say the Castel is the first time we have a visual document of how in High Renaissance they were thinking about the Mausoleum of Hadrian. So what they could see, what they understand, what they invent is a matter of debate, but is an extremely important document. Now, this document comes in parallel with the other one, which is the one with Cyriacus. So Cyriacus was very friend with Eugene, who was from Venice. And when he comes to Rome, when he is as a cardinal, he is hosted in his palace, Palazzo Venezia. No, it was not Palazzo Venezia. Palazzo Venezia was later. I'm sorry for the mistake. It was about to come in a few years, in a few decades. But of course, there was San Mark, the church, and was for the Venetians. And so this drawing is attributed to Cyriacus. Actually, is in a collection of that is called as the Ashmoleensis from in Oxford, and it's a collection of epigraphies and drawings by Bartolomeo Fonzio, who is later. You see, he was born in 1446. So we are in a period that around 1430, 1440, when Cyriacus was in Rome. And Bernard Ashmole, he attributed that to Cyriacus. The drawing is extremely interesting, also because you see, Filarete and Cyriacus, actually, they are referring to the same idea of reconstruction with small differences. You see that Filarete, he actually shows, a colonnade here, and here is are engaged columns. So it's slightly different. And we could say that this fits better to the evidence as we have seen through our studies. So it's quite incredible. All the upper part, there is the rotunda, but it's somehow more invented. But all this part has a very strong philological quality. So we just wonder what they could understand. And when we say what they could understand, you don't have to imagine that these people were the only ones looking at this building and trying to discuss its original architecture. There were many artists, many architects, and there were, of course, if you think about the destructions in 1379, it's very recent, the destruction. So there must be some documents that they could access to, but we have no evidence for that. This is a guess. So we discussed about the epitaphs. So the epitaphs, could these people, when we look at these drawings, did they know about the epitaphs? If I go back again, this is transcriptions of Cyriacus of the inscriptions. Is Cyriacus who is looking at them, or he's copying them? So what we know is the only inscription that we are missing, the only one, as we said, is the one by Hadrian and Sabina, which was possibly at the center above the main door. And who is the one who records that is Poggio Bracciolini. Poggio Bracciolini is a humanist. He travels in the monastery of Central Europe. He finds incredible Latin texts in all the libraries in the abbeys in Europe, and he goes to St. Gallen, to the Stips Bibliothek, and he can access to a copy of the itinerary of Einsiedel, and then he makes a syllogy of inscriptions, and in this syllogy, he adds a few inscriptions that he actually sees in Rome, and we don't find in other documents. And between them, there is this one. We don't know why most likely in the itinerary there were, since we have copies of the original text, there must be a lacuna in how they copied that. But thanks to Poggio Bracciolini, but we understand one thing. Poggio Bracciolini, in 1440, he is there and he sees the inscription. And there is no other way. He sees the inscription. So it's very interesting. And he writes, in Castro Sancti Angeli. These are the ones by Cyriacus. Again, it's interesting. In parete e littere sunt incise. In this wall, there are these inscriptions. And he reports that, and he gives also the distance between this one of Commodus with the one of below is Commodus. Lucius Verus is at least, we know, up to the Baroque period. These three inscriptions, there were three inscriptions that were still in the castle. Maybe not in the original position, but were there. Then they were removed and used in St. Peter's. Another very important pope comes, he is the Pope of the Renovation. He's the one who starts to think about also addressing some fundamental issues about St. Peter's. Nicholas V is renowned for his works on the Aurelian walls and the fortifications. Also, the Leonine walls, the one of Leo IV in the Vatican. And he's the one who also makes some fundamental works at Castel Sant'Angelo. So his works include, as you see in bold letters, he builds the tower of Castel Sant'Angelo, and enlarged the one by Boniface IX, and a thick wall with large towers and 3 round turrets. We have some evidence of this, of course, in this exceptional view of Rome that we have from Schedel. And you see the 3 towers, 1, 2, and the other the opposite. There was no tower in this corner because it was protected from the fortification. And I try to make it short, but this shows how advances our knowledge into what was visible and what was relied on evidence. So in this drawing is by Giuliano da Sangallo. There are a couple of drawings that are very meaningful. And you can see here 2 elements that attract our attention. The first one is the drum. You see that most of the facing with ashlars is missing, but we also see that a small part that still exists today is still there. And the other element, fundamental, is that the decoration, the architectural marble decoration of the square base was there. So at this point, one of the elements that we see here, I would like to highlight this detail here. This detail here is very important because today, when we look at the castle, very, very on top of this, we see that this is a rubble masonry that is not Roman. It's not Roman. So this is a fill of a cavity. And what I understand that all this part was demolished in 1370 something. And from the drawing of Giuliano da Sangallo, we understand that there was a huge opening here. And this huge opening is the one that supports the idea that the staircase was demolished and left the huge opening. So we have data to address there was something there. What is difficult is, of course, everyone is asking for a reconstruction, but this is hypothetical. We don't have elements. So I will come out with a hypothetical reconstruction, and all the scholars will take apart all the evidence-based reconstructions. They will say, this is wrong because cannot be that, and will concentrate on the only hypothetical part. The square basement Simone del Pollaiuolo is called the Cronaca because Vasari says, he was so precise in his measurements. He gives these wonderful measured drawings of the square base. So we know exactly in detail how the external square base was. And the Ghirlandaio makes some drawings. You see the one on the bottom is by Ghirlandaio. The one on the top is by Giuliano da Sangallo. They are the same drawing. Are they copied from a third person? Is one copying the other? We don't know. But it's very interesting. The drawings by Ghirlandaio are in Madrid at the Escorial. And it's a very important document for our understanding. And here, I would like only to point out that we see from the drawing of Giuliano that we have where the ashlars are removed, already removed by that time. And here we have a protruding part of concrete. This is the vault. It's clearly the vault, the remnants of the vault of the portico. Alexander VI Borgia, we are entering into the phase of final destruction of evidence with Alexander. His interventions are massive. I don't want to enter too much into detail, but the element that happens here is that most likely these inscriptions start not to be visible. The addition of the towers, the removal or destruction of the marble decoration, all this brings to quite the complexity of what we see today. And to complete the scene of we have with the Medici Pope Leo X, he is the one who finally addressed we remember there was the small staircase here made by Boniface IX. He has to address a way to get to the upper palace. And so he builds the yellow, you see, is the present day ramp that you go through. He actually builds this stretch here in order to make a new access to the upper part of Castel Sant'Angelo. And of course, today when you enter there and you have this ramp, you can hardly understand how was the original distribution, vertical distribution of the mausoleum. And finally, this is the last one. This comes much later, comes at a moment when we are under Paul III Farnese, major transformations. And we have Salustio Peruzzi, who is the son of Baldassare, the famous architect. And he makes us this wonderful gift. This is a plan and a section elevation of the mausoleum, the lower part, where he shows things that at that time were not visible. That corner was definitely not visible anymore because with Alexander VI, he had built the tower there. So this was not visible anymore. He draws the ramp, but the colonnade. Again, he goes with the colonnade. And he says, he writes, this is very interesting. Here there is a writing, it says, queste colonne furono messe in San Pietro da Costantino. So these columns were brought by Constantine for the construction of the basilica in St. Peter's. There is no, I have been studying that. There is no evidence. It's interesting. There is the Piranesi is very skeptical about all these columns. And there is no evidence for that. But it's interesting to see that the idea again of the colonnade comes out. So my guess is that there is need to dig more into the Renaissance sources. We still are missing a lot of drawings that could be meaningful for our understanding, but the few ones we have definitely give us support to our work made on site. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paolo. Thank you for that absolute masterclass in not only how you need to carry out first-hand investigation of the site, but then also using everything from 9th century itineraries, recording inscriptions, to the inscriptions themselves, to then antiquarian drawings and even the doors of St. Peter's in order to try and reconstruct what potentially the monument looked at in the first place. I should remind those listening online that they can write any questions they have in the chat, and likewise, I'll open up to the room for questions as well. But if I can just start, you said, maybe you don't want to go into it, but you alluded to your hypothetical idea of, so we've got this staircase and then there's potentially this opening. Mm-hmm. What's in the opening at the front overlooking the bridge.
Yeah. Hypothetical. Can be whatever. So let's discuss what we would like to have there, because we have no evidence of anything. So it's just a matter of trying to, it's how actually reconstructions are done in the archaeological field. You have the foundations and you say the elevation was like this. Of course, there is some base of evidence. Now, I am coming to two fundamental points. The first one, if there was a staircase or whatever to connect the two levels that was embedded into the extant concrete structure, it would be there and would have been reused. So the first thing is that we have no evidence in present day structure of any staircase beyond the first stretch going to the upper part. So this brings to the second point. If it's not there, it's outside. If it's outside, it means that just in the front part of the mausoleum, there was a volume. And this volume had the system to go up. In this volume, I have suggested earlier to have the system of the false door that we see in the coins of consecratio, in the funeral pyres. And it's possible. We don't have certainty. I also, we were discussing this earlier, that I am very curious because I see in the Mausoleum of Augustus, just above the entrance corridor, there is another small corridor covered with a barrel vault, and scholarship has alluded to understand what exactly means this corridor. It typically would serve for service, but it's interesting that it's exactly matching the entrance corridor. Because the staircase we have in the Mausoleum of Hadrian is as large as the dromos, so it's a very large staircase. It doesn't make sense to have a very large staircase that then becomes something small that goes on the upper level. So I am thinking that there might have been maybe an opening just facing the bridge there. But all this has to, we are working on the digital model on that.
Let's open up to the floor for questions. Should be a roving mic. Steve's just going to get the... Okay, we have two questions at the front here. Alison.
Oh, thank you very much. I have a question about these radial walls within the sort of square outer wall, I guess. Do we have any idea about their function, their nature? Are they supporting something, or are they creating another loop round as it appears on this drawing?
Yep, very good point. According to Salustio, they are buttressing the drum, but this drum is 70 meters thick concrete that doesn't need any support. The evidence shows that all these cells here, the doors are not aligned. The doors are placed randomly, so this does not reflect. But remember that he's drawing that after the demolitions of that occurred 200 years earlier, and I have no evidence for any sort of floors, decoration, and everything. So I think my interpretation is that at the very first stage of the construction, they built, and we have the evidence for that, a concrete wall here that would serve to protect the site from the floods. The floods were a huge issue in Rome, particularly for the construction. A flood could destroy entirely a work done. So protecting the site from the floods was important. And I believe that these elements actually buttress the perimetral wall because it's a very thin wall. And of course, later they become the support of the terrace. So the design process is very clever, uses the structures for the construction process and for the final aim of the building.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had a question about the inscriptions that you were mentioning at the very beginning, and in particular about the manuscript transmission of these inscriptions, because we know that before the birth of CIL, the manuscript transmission is particularly problematic, and sometimes this manuscript can be not very reliable, partly because sometimes, as you were suggesting already, there's no autoptic analysis, and as you showed us, there are some significant differences in the drawings, for instance, of the mausoleum and so on. And so we already see there that it can be a bit tricky to sometimes to rely on those manuscripts, especially for the epigraphic tradition. And I saw that there are references to the CIL. So part of this inscription, this epigraphic record, is still extant, as far as I understand, or it exists just on manuscript transmission.
So I have this winter, we started a research group with François Chausson, who has been working on the inscriptions, Maria Letizia Caldelli, and because I said, we cannot always go to the CIL and see what Mommsen has with his immense knowledge understood without going ourselves to the principal sources. So we have started now, as I was saying, as for the work I'm doing on the mausoleum, which is to investigate principally the source, we are going back to the original sources that were used. And of course, in we say 150 years, there is a lot of knowledge more about the transmission and use of and the copies we have from the Itinerary, but many others. So although we will never be at the Mommsen level, of course, but we can rely on a scientific community who is knowledgeable and can, working together, we can get to that. So it's a matter just looking at the originals, how they are copied, because of course when they make a copy, they make a mess. They don't understand sometimes the significance of some positions and so of some side notes. When they say, for instance, in the drawing of Cyriacus, they say Rome apud Tibur. One of the interpretations is not that the building is showing something that is Rome apud Tibur, which is Hadrian's villa, but simply from that page in the original manuscript started the collection of drawings from Hadrian's villa, which we know Cyriacus made. So he copies that without understanding the relationship with the drawing he's copying. So all this makes everything more complicated. But again, the only way to address that, always go to the source. Never write a book only in the library.
Questions in the room? While we're waiting for people to gather thoughts, I've got a question on the spoliation of this monument, which obviously you've mentioned on several occasions. So there's one idea that possibly the columns get taken to St. Peter's, but there's no actual evidence, physical evidence for that. At what point do all the ashlars get taken from the drum? Because that in itself must be an enormous operation to strip all of this
Well,
off.
this,
And do we have any idea where they're reused or where they ended up?
I'm getting to some idea of that, because it's not only the drum, all the perimeter wall, all this wall is all made of ashlars, all this. And I was looking at the stretches of masonry where we see the masonry is all medieval. It's all medieval. So also this wall was completely dismantled. So I think that the period that runs, I mean, when you get to Boniface IX, the mausoleum is spoliated and demolished and things. So the actual need to make the works as a castle is that because they have to rebuild stretches of masonry that are missing. So the spoliation is a topic that goes for all Rome, as you know. It's difficult to understand. The volume of blocks is immense, but these are all peperino blocks, most of them. So it's a material that Rome is filled with that. And we don't have to imagine that they are using them as blocks. They're breaking. Instead of going to the quarries, the quarry is the artificial hill.
And then the few bits that we can still see, so embedded in the house opposite the bridge, in terms of marble decoration, is there any credence to the idea that the head of Hadrian that's now in the Vatican, that comes from the statue on top, or is that not?
No, well, if there is something I'm not expert of is about the part of the sculptural decoration. It's all a field that needs an expertise I don't have, so I rely on better scholars.
Just check up online audience. I'm not entirely sure how to do. We'd like to have a question at the front as well. Oops.
Please.
Thank you. Just a quick question. When you're looking at the original construction, do you think of a mausoleum as a static structure, designed to impress, etc., or did it have ongoing functionality such that aspects of it would be used for annual festivals, etc., in terms of when you're actually thinking of the design objectives behind it?
Hmm. Well, we enter in a very delicate matter. What we know is that imperial mausolea, since they had burials that belonged to the whole family, and so the epitaphs we have is a small portion of the ones that were there. So of course, the date of recording the day of the death or the dies natalis, as usual, there were ceremonies in memory and dedicated, not only in the mausoleum, but in the city. So these were events that, of course, reinforce the perception of the imperial family and their special status and divine entity. I have supported, and I wrote about the idea of the mausoleum having been used for religious ceremonies beyond the ones that had a more, let's say, restricted circle of people, based on some discussions we made with Filippo Quarelli about the rotunda on the very top. These were based on the fact that it's a rotunda. There is no doubt that the rotunda is there. It looks very similar to the Pantheon. And in the reconstruction and in my articles, you will find that there is a beautiful door facing the river, which makes the temple usable. But we had this question mark, is there a door or not? And 1 year ago, we discovered there is no door. So this is the round building seems to have only a service door accessing to the helical staircase going on the roof, which changes our perception of the use of the upper part. So to summarize, I will think that all the lower part going to the funeral chamber had processions and everything related to that, but the upper part of the building had a different use. Hypothetical.
Okay, if there's no more questions in the room, is there one online, is there? I don't know how to bring that up on here. We're missing our usual IT support. I don't know if you're able to read the question on their screen, Steve. Thank you. Like the importance of having in-house IT really helps.
I know very well.
Exactly. Don't rely on me to know how to use a computer. But I think Steve's gone to read the question. So it's only what 5 years since we started doing things online, right? After COVID, and yeah. Oh, brilliant! You took a photo of it. Wonderful. Well, I'll read out your photograph because we're high tech here. This is from Cristina Gonzalez Longo. We all focus on popes who paid for the work and architects who drew the buildings in sketchbooks or similar. Did you manage to unravel who actually designed and executed the various interventions?
Well, one of the fundamental sources we have is Vasari. So whatever the artist Niccolò di Pietro Lamberti, Niccolò Aretino, is Vasari who mentions that. We have Infessura, who is also a source for the time of Nicholas V. So we have sources who describe those who were responsible for the project. So it's, for instance, Niccolò Aretino, he was a sculptor, but he is also, we know from Vasari that he works for the fortifications in Umbria, in central Italy. So these are people that are skilled, and they are head of a team of people, I suppose. But the names are those that come from the sources. Of course, everything changes with the 16th century. For instance, we know that Antonio da Sangallo, the elder, gets paid by Alexander VI for works for design works in Castel Sant'Angelo. So we can attribute to him the design of the interventions that were made under Alexander VI, and so on and so forth. So at a certain point, it becomes easier because we have the accounts. I still think that there is a lot of work to be done in the archives to identify really more documents related to Castel Sant'Angelo.
Presumably, this also helps potentially with understanding its spoliation, because whoever owns it owns the building material to then sell as well.
Yes.
Well, if there's no more questions, thank you, Steve, for assisting with the microphone and the photographs. I'd like to invite everybody here to come upstairs for the reception. But before we do, can we please thank Paolo once again for a really fantastic talk?